it got to the point where my panic attacks were so bad, I one day thought about ending my life. I'd been bullied a lot. I didn't feel very safe at home. I was exploring my sexuality at the time. I was in a neighborhood where it was really not safe to be gay. So I was banned from my family for over a decade, hiding away my sexuality and my fears about that for so long. It was safer to do that at the time. I just hate lying. You know, that trying to be deceptive. My favorite phrase, I'm just going to see what happens. No expectations. Let's just see what happens.
Paul Sheppard, welcome to Inspired By.
It's really nice to be here.
I can't believe we finally made this happen. I feel like it's been in the pipeline for so long.
I know, and I get to see you in person.
I know, it's fantastic. So, Paul, obviously, I know you really well. We've been in touch for like the last year, and I know you as a fantastic podcast host of Mindset Change podcast, but you're all about mindset change. And so I want to start there. Tell me about, when we say mindset change, what are we talking about?
We're talking about the limiting beliefs, the way that we see the world, our perceptions, the way that we've been conditioned in life to, again, see the world in a way which often isn't very helpful for us. So your mindset will determine your experience of reality. So we don't see the world as it is. We really do see the world as we are.
Wow. And that's part of the challenge, right? Because I think so many people just think seeing is believing. I see that, therefore it's true. And actually, there's so much more under the surface that we can control how we see and what we see, right?
Well, everything is literally energy flowing into our eyeballs, and our brains, literally from our programming, our conditioning, will tell us what it is. So, but what we can beautifully do is change our perception so we create a different experience of reality. You know, just in this room right now, we're both processing it very, very differently based on our perceptions and our belief system. So yeah, we have the power to change how we see our worlds.
And you speak so beautifully about that. And I've heard your podcast, I've been on your podcast, and I know a lot about your passions. But tell me about Paul before mindset change.
So Paul before mindset change, and how I got into this, was I had a really terrible anxiety disorder. So big panic attacks most days. In fact, I remember my first ever panic attack. My mother didn't know what it was and handed me an inhaler, an asthma inhaler, to resolve the issue. And I'm like, it's definitely not an asthma attack. And what was going on for me at the time was that I'd been bullied a lot. I didn't feel very safe at home. I was exploring my sexuality at the time. I could tell that there was something what I felt was wrong. And I was in a neighborhood where it was really not safe to be gay. So that was the last thing I wanted to be. Did everything I could not to be, but it was hanging around. And no matter what I did to try and forget it and wish it away as a phase, it was still there. And it got to the point where my panic attacks were so bad, I one day thought about ending my life. I remember sitting in the bathroom, and I was sort of sat there with a bottle of pills, just thumbing the pills, just going, I don't think I can carry on. Really don't think I can carry on. Because I just couldn't see a future without anxiety being in it. I didn't know how to get rid of it. I'd had therapy. I was training as a counselor from a young age. After I left school, nothing was touching the sides. When I went to the doctor, it was, oh, here's some antidepressants. After 5 questions on a slip of paper. And there was no, what's really going on with you? It was just take this medication. And I was scared to take the medication. So I saw no hope, because I tried all the traditional routes. I saw no hope for my future. So I sat there in the bathroom and looking at the pills, and I just remember the images of my family coming into my mind. And I was just thinking, oh, I just really don't want to hurt these people. I don't want to let them down, but I don't think I can carry on. And then the strangest thing happened out of nowhere. So as I sat there, tears rolling down my face, there was this weird, I can only describe it as like the whole of my body seemed to judder with this energy shift. And through every fiber of my being, this inner voice just said, you're doing all of this wrong. You're over-focusing on your mind to change your anxiety. You need to come down into your body. And I had no idea what that meant. But I was kind of relieved that there was something, 'cause this felt mystical, or I had no idea what this voice was, really didn't. But it just happened. And I felt relieved that I was given something to go on, even though I had no idea what that meant. And then that led me to explore the physiology of anxiety and realized that I'd been putting all my eggs into one basket. Having therapy, trying to understand my past, trying to change the way that I thought. If I just thought more positively, then I could be anxiety-free. And I realized that actually I need to come down into the body. Went through the physiology of it and discovered that I've been breathing wrongly. My diet was awful. I was caffeine addict, drinking into the evening, wondering why I had insomnia, all of those things. So I changed so many different things by exploring the body and the mind that I eventually became anxiety-free. And that is what I teach people and coach people into with mindset change.
Wow. Well, thank you first of all for sharing so openly, because I know how hard that can be to share. And it's a big part of, especially for you, it's been the biggest part that's driven you to where you are now. And just for a bit of context, Paul, how old were you at that time where you were sat there with the pills?
20.
20, wow. And how long did it take you to sort of find that you were kind of had that moment of, actually, I think I'm good now?
I would say it took, and it's going to sound odd, about 2 decades.
Wow.
I know, because there was no help. There was no one whose path I could follow. There's so much conflicting information. And I also did whatever I could to self-sabotage myself from actually getting better. So it was one of those things where I held myself back because it was easier to do that than face the unknown of what it was like to be anxiety-free. Because I remember when I first felt anxiety-free, right? I don't know where I was, but I remember the feeling and I thought, oh my God, this is really peaceful. This feels lovely. It's almost like my nervous system just completely went into Zen mode. And it felt so lovely, but it didn't take long for me to go, but this feels unnatural. I don't like this. Because I was so used to feeling hypervigilant, false sense of control over a future that didn't exist. And, I enjoyed the drama and the excitement that kind of went with anxiety too.
Yeah. Do you know what I find really interesting about what you've shared? I've obviously known you for about a year now, and I can't imagine you being anything but so calm and grounded. And every time I talk to you, there's so much presence that you bring. You're very focused. You're very, very rarely looking at other things, or you're probably one of the few people that, can sit on a Zoom and listen to everyone talk and not get distracted by things. And I think it's fascinating to think that you can come from a place where you've not been like that. Isn't it amazing though, when something goes well, there is a part of us that can go, wait, hold on, this isn't right. Or worse, and I don't know if you experienced this, but I certainly did, where you're like, what if it doesn't last? What if it comes back? Did you ever have those sort of thoughts or experiences?
All the time. And I really never really understood what it was. So I trained in mindfulness, where you can begin to train yourself to separate yourself from that voice. But that voice was always there, always judging, always criticizing, finding a way to be dissatisfied. And that's what most people still have. And it's conditioned into us. We're brainwashed into this dream state where we're really hard on ourselves. And even if we get a moment of happiness, we enjoy it for a few seconds, minutes, before our brain begins to look for that next problem to solve. And it's just, I call it being asleep. And one thing I like to talk about is helping people wake up. not to anyone else's truth, but to their truth, for them to be themselves. But most people don't know who that is.
Yeah. And they're also not aware of how to even tune into that, right? Because you keep talking about that voice and the voice, and I had that too, and I think we all have that voice. And for you, who was that voice? Was it still Paul? Did it still sound and feel like you, or did it sort of start to feel alien to you? Now, I just wanted to quickly interrupt this episode to share a quick message with you. Now, I've been hosting these interviews with Inspired by Show for a while now, and I've been loving all of the great feedback from our listeners. And it really means a lot when you all share from listening to these episodes, watching these episodes, share your incredible feedback. And I love that you love it as much as we do. Now, my mission for the Inspired by Show is to inspire others to challenge the norm, share their story, knowing that it's okay to be vulnerable and, shock horror, take the mask off and be raw and real. So I have a favor to ask. Can you help me on this mission by sharing this episode with someone who you think needs to hear this message? Maybe there's a friend, a loved one, a colleague, or someone that you know that would really benefit from hearing this inspiring story. If you could do that to help us, help even more people to challenge the norm and push themselves out of their own comfort zone, then I'd really appreciate it. So if you haven't already, share this episode with a friend, a loved one, a colleague, or someone that you know would benefit. Now, back to the episode.
It was a mixture of me, like a young teen version of me. I could see him whenever I did inner work, he would appear. And it was also my father. My father was really hard. I come from a family which were very private and didn't open up emotionally about things. So having hugs or being told we were loved wasn't really on the cards, but they were very practical. That's how they showed their love. But as children, you don't quite kind of understand that. You could tell something's missing. And it's only later in life you think, oh God, I was never hugged or told I was loved. And when I talked to my mother about it, she said, yeah, no one told me that either. So I kind of understood where she was coming from, because to do it for me would have been quite alien.
Yeah, I can completely relate to that, because I think similar, it's a generational thing, I think, in the past, of people not really understanding. I feel very fortunate, the generation I've been born into, which is now, and when I have my family, is very loving. It's very normal to love who you want to love and love how you want to love. And I love that about the world we're in. My parents were very similar to yours, very rarely showed love. And I'm very close to my mum. And when I asked her, because now, my mum and my dad, I'm the first one who was like, love you. And they've now really very good at giving it back. But when I asked my mum, she said the same thing. She said very, very rarely she got that. And isn't it fascinating how now, because we're so aware and what we would call awake, we're more aware to people's understanding of their perspectives. It's not like you don't love me anymore. It's actually, I understand where you get that from. And I'm sorry that you didn't get the love either. And I'm glad that I can break that pattern for my future family.
Yes, nice. It's a lovely way that you just put that. There has to be a compassion towards them and understanding. There's a big part of self-discovery which can go down the blame route, blaming parents for what we didn't have. And I did that. I talked about it on a podcast episode. I literally called my father Darth Vader because of the way that I felt victimized by him. He did go down a very dark route when I came out as gay. So I was banned from my family for over a decade, not to go anywhere near anyone, or there would be trouble. So when we did eventually sort it all out, but he was still quite vindictive because he was reacting to the pain inside. And whenever I tried to connect with him, I found that because I saw him as the enemy, he would react back in the same way. When I realized that and dropped it and actually began to look at, wonder where he's coming from, wonder what's going on for him, he opened up and told me things about himself which he'd never talked about before. And from that moment, our relationship began to change in ways I couldn't have imagined. So it's much healthier now. He's still very private, but he's opened up a lot more.
Yeah. And isn't that such a beautiful thing that you've helped him to create? And it's such a shame that you went through so much pain and suffering, my words, from your experience for that to happen. But what a beautiful way for it to come out the other side.
Yeah. He went recently into a hospital for a lung removal. He had lung cancer. And he came down to visit me in Brighton. And I thought, I'm going to have to say the one thing he probably doesn't want to hear, but I am going to let him know that I love him. So I said to Dad, I love you. He was so embarrassed. And he made some jokes. And then he went away and I had the operation. After he came out of hospital, he gave me a call. And I think what I'd said had touched him because he apologized for everything that he'd done. And he was so sorry, and that he just wanted from now on to be a better person. So I think it's really powerful to begin to understand where a person's coming from. Not to fall into that dream state where you're mind reading and fortune telling, which is so easy to do, but to wake up to the truth. What is really going on here? And find out and ask. And just just from saying, I love you, it hit home somehow. And then we had this conversation when he returned. So that was another pivotal moment in our relationship. And it felt so freeing. It's nice to be released from that.
Yeah.
Instead of being weighed down by feeling victimized and then having someone to blame for current circumstances if they're not favorable.
Yeah. Isn't it it's a lovely word you said there, which was blame. I find it really interesting because it's almost very freeing when you let go of blame, right? And I think a lot of us can blame our parents, blame ex-employers, ex-partners for pain. And actually, it's when I forgave various people in my life that had harmed me, it was really liberating because it was like, actually, I can't blame them for how I reacted to something. And yes, it hurt me and that was valid, but actually it's really freeing to let go of it and let go of the blame.
Yeah, I think it's really important to move on from what is known as a victim mindset, because a victim mindset will look for people to blame. And it becomes almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy where we just keep being attracted to situations where we find people to be angry at, to feel victimized, to keep waiting for something bad to happen. And when we begin to, and this is hard, I'm not saying it's going to be easy, when you find a way to start taking 100% responsibility for your life, which isn't for the faint-hearted, when you find a way to do that, that is where liberation comes from. That's where you can begin to let go of the idea that other people are to blame for your circumstances. Now, I'm not saying that bad things doesn't happen. If someone hurt me, I have to deal with how that feels. But it is my responsibility to change or work on the perceptions on what happens afterwards. So just to keep focusing on that person, as in they're the enemy, and they're, from now on, because of what they did, my bad circumstances or how I feel is their fault. We have to let that go. And that is, again, waking up to our truth instead of being in that dream state of the victim mindset, which is so powerful to release yourself from. No one deserves to keep holding on to that. It really does weigh us down.
Yeah, it does. And that's the thing I find fascinating, though, because it's also the easiest way to be. When you live in victim mode, it's actually really easy. Like I would say the hardest way to live is taking 100% responsibility. Like you say, it's not for the faint-hearted. And that's the hardest part, because when you're around people that you love that are maybe still in victim mode, we know that it's not serving them, but also they're super comfortable there.
It is comfortable. We do stick to better the devil you know. So if you've been conditioned or you've had a past where being the victim was something that was of a regular occurrence, that as a child, a child's not responsible. They can't ask them to take 100% responsibility for their mindset. We can do that as we become adults. But we take that programming from as children into adulthood. And in the mindset coaching that I do, I talk about something called transaction analysis, which is a therapy based in psychotherapy from Eric Berne. And we talk about the child ego state. You know, when you get that feeling of being stubborn and you can feel yourself almost like age regressing, and you know you're doing it, you know, and it's that part of you that procrastinates or says, even though something's good for you, you're like, nope. It's that part of you, which is the child ego state. And we also have what's known as the parent ego state, that critical part of us at times, or over nurturing. So we can fluctuate unconsciously between the two. And we can move into a more awake state, an adult state, which is where we can be very present, non-judgmental, focus on what's happening here and now, be solution focused. So that's what I coach people with. But that child ego state is very prolific for a lot of people. And that's where a lot of the victim mindset creeps in. Also the scarcity mindset. There's just not enough. Not enough time, not enough money. Yeah. I'm not enough. I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so those sorts of things are very important for a person to let go. Because otherwise, if you don't, how can you begin to find out that voice that's inside of you? We've all got it. There's a very powerful voice of intuition. I heard it back when I was 20. That told me I was wrong in how I was handling anxiety. If we don't listen to that voice and let it guide us through life, we are just going to be puppets on a string of our conditioning, literally. So that's why it's really important to begin to let go of your old conditioning. Otherwise, what future do you have where you're just going to be blaming and worrying and suffering? And when you get a bit of peace, that's not going to be good enough. I have to find another way to blame, worry, and suffer.
Yeah. And like you say, it just continues and continues if we don't solve the pattern.
It really doesn't stop.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. I listen to people on my podcast, and when I talk about the scarcity mindset or victim mindset, or even just the joy of being happy, most people say it just doesn't last very long before I'm finding a way to be miserable again. Finding a problem to solve. And I posted this question on social media recently. It's a very powerful question which begins to wake you up a little. And it's from Locke Kelly, who's a brilliant mindfulness spiritual teacher. And he says, or asks, what's here right now when there are no problems to solve? And that question short circuits the mind for a bit, because the ego is like, what? And then you get an experience of peace and calm because the ego is stopped for a moment. And when I posted it on social media, it's interesting, because I often put a little tagline of, I'm not sure how many people will get the answer to this question, which obviously gets people to think, I bet I can. But when it short circuits their ego, I saw, hundreds and hundreds of comments from thousands of people all messaging us going, I felt that peace. I felt that stillness just for that moment. Just because the ego, had a little rest.
I just felt that as soon as you said that. Yeah. I felt it straight away. I was like, wow, that is fascinating.
It's a brilliant question, isn't it?
Yeah. But how often do we accept that it's okay to not have those problems, because our ego is designed to keep us safe and look after us? Now, Paul, I want to talk about that moment when you were 20 and you had that awakening and that voice that was your intuition telling you you've been doing it wrong. What did you do next? And was it a case of, a lot of what we read in here was like, things all just improved? Or was it a case of you believing it over time? How did that sort of play out for you?
No, I knew that I'd had to begin to look at the physiology now, because I'd completely ignored that, because I was part of a culture which was, if you just think different, if you think more positively, then your world would be amazing, which in a way, that does have an impact. And that's what mindset is all about. But mindset, the way that I look at it, is mind, body, heart, and purpose. Everything, the holistic point of view, everything is connected, everything is one. So you need to look at all areas, but that was a bit of information I was missing at the time. So it took me a long time to research and find out how to work with anxiety. The first thing I learned, by the way, which I was shocked to discover, was that I was breathing wrongly. No one said, you are breathing wrongly. Yeah, so I was a shallow mouth breather. And I was like, what? How does this make sense? And then just by beginning to breathe down to the diaphragm a bit more and extend the exhale, your nervous system calms down. So it's like a car. When we breathe in, we stimulate the sympathetic nervous system and we become a bit more alert. Lovely. But if we do that too much, we can create a stress cycle. So the body thinks that you're in some form of danger. So we get more of those negative thoughts and your ego will sound a lot louder. But when you breathe out and extend the exhale and begin to relax the body, those thoughts begin to dissipate. We can become more present, more calmer, and anxiety begins to die down because we've told the brain we are safe. No one told me that. No one said, by the way, your mouth breathing is really bad. And I'm like, right. So I think someone pointed it out as your mouth is the exhaust. Just let it be the exhaust and just use your nose to breathe in. So that was a big turning point for me. And then the next one was, this was a mind thing though, that really complemented it, was your thoughts are not real. When I first heard that, I was like, what? But I'm thinking it, surely it must mean something. Yeah, because I was so attached to my thoughts. My ego was so close that whatever I thought, I just simply believed. And then through mindfulness training, I began to, because when you're relaxing the nervous system, it becomes so much easier to start to see your thoughts for what they are, complete illusions. No thought is real or true. It's just a perception, no matter how we perceive it. And it's, because of course there's a big debate, but it is something that can be liberating, that the only things that will ever hold you back in life are going to be thoughts, and they're not even real or true.
Scary, right? Especially when you think about the amount of times that we feel that we're so certain on a thought, and that must be real and that must be true.
Yeah.
And actually we can be so fixated on that, not knowing, like you say. I mean, the way I always looked at it, because I sort of eased myself into the spiritual journey. I did have a bit of an awakening, but until recently I didn't realize that that's what it was. I just sort of thought I was hit rock bottom and there was only one way up, sort of vibe.
Yeah.
Probably quite similar to yours, to be honest with you, Paul. And I remember I used to say I'm not very spiritual all the time, and I actually am completely spiritual. I'm so into the woo-woo, it's unreal. I used to call myself woo curious at first to try and ease myself into it. But actually back then I didn't realize it, and the only way my logical brain would understand that thoughts are not real was I kept challenging myself, well, how many times do my thoughts change? How many times do I think one thing and then the next morning think that's not true anymore? And that was the only way I managed to logically see it as, well, it can't be a fact then, can it? If it kept changing.
Absolutely. I love that you say that. There is a bit of, we use the word woo-woo, and I challenged a guest on this because they said this to me, they're like spiritual woo-woo. And I'm like, it's a kind of form of spiritual shaming, isn't it? Yeah, it is. We're almost like apologizing for what we're going to say next in spiritual terms. But waking up is the ultimate mindset. Just imagine realizing that your thoughts are completely illusional all the time. And that's what it's like. You just see through it. You feel awake, you feel present, you feel connected to everything, everyone. You feel so alive. There's nothing that's going to stop you from achieving what you truly want. And we're talking about what we truly want, and not what our ego may have been conditioned to believing it wants. It's a very different thing. To finding out what we truly want and simply going for it. And that's what I'm doing now. I'm like, my favorite phrase, I'm just going to see what happens. No expectations. Let's just see what happens.
Which is so liberating and grounding. Even the energy when you say it, you're like, yeah, let's see. It's not like, let's go, or it's just very calm and very grounded. And I'm curious for you, Paul, because obviously the journey you've been on over the last 2 decades, from having those pills in your hand and wanting to take your own life to then coming out as gay and now doing what you're doing, it's like you really have stepped into, this is who I really am.
Yeah.
Do you see there being a connection between you unlocking this new part of your mindset and then having the confidence to tell your family that you were gay and really open up and accept that part of you?
Do you know, there's always been this thing in me of, I just hate lying, that trying to be deceptive and hiding away my sexuality and my fears about that for so long, because actually it was safer to do that at the time. But you're lying to the people who are meant to love you, even though they might not be saying it, but that's what you believe. And yeah, the quest for the truth is always very important for me. So looking back, since I had this big spiritual awakening event that was more recent, I can now see I was always on this path to be fully awake, be fully awake. Even though I never really fully understood what that meant, I understood it logically. And, everything's an illusion. We're all connected. We're all one. People have those experiences when they've taken psilocybin, all sorts of, I kind of got it. And then when it happened, it was like I'd gone from looking at the car to being the driver. And it was a completely different experience. And everything that I'd been through was always about the truth. The truth of anxiety, the truth of our mindsets, the truth of what holds us back. What lies are we telling to ourselves to protect ourselves, and from what? That's the funny thing, isn't it? Most people, when they begin to explore that, they don't really know what it is that they're protecting themselves from, but they're doing it anyway. So I was always on this path. And to come out when I did was because I just didn't want to lie anymore. And again, I paid for that. There was a lot of consequences for that, which were really tough. But everything I went through, I would never change. When they asked this question of, if you could go back in time and change anything in your history or say something to your younger self, I wouldn't take the risk, because everything has happened perfectly, because I absolutely adore where I am right now. Mm. And who knows what's happening next? I ain't got a clue. But I'm just going to see what happens and go from there. But I appreciate everything that's happened in the past. But everything was tough. Coming out was tough. Leaving my home city of Bristol, because it was safer to do so. I moved to Brighton, which was the best thing I ever did. Very welcoming community, more spiritually minded. Though when I did move there, I did become a full-on atheist. I threw the baby out with the bathwater at one point. Like, none of it's real. But that was another rite of passage. That was another way of me seeking the truth, and then realizing that atheism wasn't going to be the answer with honesty either. And I just thought, you know what? I'm just going to be aware there's something much bigger than myself out there, and then connect with that and I'm part of that. And that's it. And that's led me to where I am today, being fully awake and coaching people with the ultimate mindset, having a podcast, being here with you.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been an amazing ride so far.
Yeah. It's really interesting that you say, though, that you wouldn't change anything. And, people, a great podcast question that people often ask is, what would you say to your younger self? But I think it's really powerful what you've shared there, because to me, if someone was to say I would change it, or I would say this, it's actually come from a place of ego to control, to say, well, actually, I could fix it. I could have done it better. How do we know that couldn't have gone so much worse, and actually not be where I am now?
Exactly. It's a dangerous game. It is a victim mindset again, predicting the worst, that I'm not going to change. My future's going to be just as terrible. Like I was sat there in the bathroom at 20. That's what I was fully involved in. That was fully me, the victim mindset back then. And that's not his fault. That's what I was going through. But to recognize that from this very moment, and I love pointing this out to clients, that we have infinite timelines stretching away from us. And if you just imagine on some of those infinite timelines, your ideal life unfolding, and that will happen from each decision you make. Every decision you make can take you further down that timeline. So what is it you want? What is it you're going to do today? What little steps are you going to take? And that gets people quite excited that it's possible, it's a potential. And, your mindset is very important with that. Looking after your nervous system, coming into your body, being healthy is very important for that. How we connect with others is very important for that.
Mm.
You know, are you living your purpose? That's very important for that. But we live in quite a reactive society, which is distracting the hell out of us, you know? And so people are not really getting to know themselves or what they truly want. They're too busy being hypnotized and brainwashed and conditioned into sleepwalking through life. And they're suffering for it. That's why I would always try my best with my content to get people to wake up a little and get a glimpse of their true potential. Not what I think it should be, not what anyone else should think it should be, but what they realize is their truth and what it should be.
Yeah. And I think that's why what you're doing is so fascinating, Paul. And it's so great to see all the incredible things that you're up to. And one of the reasons why I'm particularly passionate about what you're doing and seeing you do so well with it is because when I first trained as a coach 7 years ago, I was around a lot of people that get into coaching, and I want to pick your brains on that industry anyway. But we were always told people don't buy mindset. Right? Nobody will pay for a coach because they don't want to fix their mindset. And to some extent, I experienced that. What's your views? Because your business is called Mindset Change.
Yeah.
You could argue that they want the change more than the mindset, but what's your views when people say, no, mindset, nobody wants to buy that?
Do you know, it reminds me of my stepson. He says to me, don't you do that mindset shit on me today? I'm like, what are you on about? I decided I'm going to hypnotize him instead, and that will get the chores done. It reminded me of that. Again, I think that's changed. I don't know. People are more interested in their mindset. And the reason is that they're miserable. And there's a reason for that. What is it that they want? Your mindset determines everything in lots of respects. So it all feeds into, how healthy your body is going to be. And if your body is healthy, then you're going to have a better mindset. It's also linked. So it's, that I think the perception of mindset is changing. It's becoming more used. But you're right. I don't think people understand mindset enough sometimes in general to get fully what it means to be able to change that or know that they can change that. But when I do a coaching call with someone to find out if I can help them, the main focus is on what do you want? And what problems have you got? And how can I help you solve them? Because it's so surprising what problems they come up with and how through developing new skills and new ways of seeing things, working with their nervous system, changing the way their brain is interacting or reacting to negative thoughts, that change opens up the possibility to get what they want. So I'm not there to hold their hand. I'm there to shine a light on the inner resources that they've got so that they can begin to build upon them and develop that confidence for themselves. And I always say to them that I can tell you the best tools in the world and I can show you stuff that will really help you feel calm. But unless you practice what I do with you, it won't mean anything. It'll just be pretty words.
Yeah. And that's one of the bugbears that I had in the coaching industry, which is why I stopped doing coaching. I do a lot of coaching in my book publishing company now because we do writing coaching, but I don't do the traditional, although there's a lot of limiting beliefs that can come up with writing a book, as I'm sure you will have experienced or will have soon. But what I find is that it can become a bit codependent. If people have had a great coaching relationship, it's like they don't want to ever stop. And I had some clients that were like, can I sign up to you for another 12 months? Can we do this? Like, I want to make sure I've always got you in my life. And it made me feel very uncomfortable. What's your views of that sort of codependency that can come out of the coaching industry? Well,
that has to be addressed. There's nothing wrong with having a coach for a few years. Nothing wrong with that. Some of the world's most famous and most popular coaches talk about their clients who have been with them for years because there are new challenges, I guess. Some of my clients have been with me for a few years, and it's amazing to see where they are now because I've been supporting them through quite very strong experiences. Like, for example, one client just came to mind who couldn't even leave our home city, and wanted to get traveling again. And I love working with travel anxiety because that's something that I know quite a bit about, having had that myself at one point. So to see this person now traveling the world quite happily, and now they're wanting me to do some work with them on their business. So that in itself it's an absolute honor to be asked. You know, we worked for quite a while on helping them build a confidence up in themselves in their personal life. And then they were like, okay, I really want you to focus on my business now. So, and these things, it can take time. And sometimes it's because the length of time is due to, they might only talk to you for once a month. You know, it's not like if it was, I don't know how I'd feel about seeing someone weekly for years.
Yeah.
I would be concerned about that. But the relationship can sometimes last for years because it's quite spread out.
I think where I saw it going and where I do now with our clients, because we have similar things, if their problem changes and you're continuing to support them, then of course it's where people get stuck in that. I'm not taking action, I'm not fixing it, but I quite like having these conversations, you know. And I think that also comes with the coaching industry has grown massively. What's your views on the coaching space not being regulated, you know, people becoming coaches and helping people with their mindset without the proper qualifications?
Do you know, even, let's be honest about that for a moment, even, you know, I belong to, you know, the International Coaching Federation. It's not that regulated, despite a federation, or it isn't. Anyone considers they're a coach. Probably some of the best coaches in the world don't even belong to any organization at all. So it is a bit like the Wild West. And yet anyone can say that they're a coach and put themselves out and do coaching. But those people don't tend to survive, because as coaches, we thrive off of having a good reputation and, you know, word of mouth, and people knowing and feeling that they're going to get benefit from working with you. So my podcast, my socials give people a hint of what it would be like to be with me. And I've been doing coaching since 2005. So it's, you know, I've enjoyed it, and I wouldn't change that. I mean, it's evolving, but it's still, I don't know how it would be regulated, because I trained in therapy and that is regulated. But yeah, you can see how still there's not enough, you know, checks to find out how a person is as a therapist. You know, there are going to be good therapists, bad therapists. So I'm not sure what that regulation would look like. You know, I don't know what the answer would be on that, other than, you know, I have Google reviews. I don't know. So people review me and they can see how many people have given me 5 stars. So that might be an indicator. Maybe that's, you know, a review-based system going forward. Maybe that would help, but I'm not sure how it could be regulated that much.
Yeah, I hear that. And it's hard because you can have people that have the best qualifications in the world, still just not great coaches. You know, I've seen people coach, and I've actually had a lot of coaches which have experienced this, where, you know, it's just a checklist of questions. And it's like, I must go through my 10 questions that I've been given in my coaching qualification. You know, whereas, as you know, being a coach in nearly 20 years, it's about listening and being curious and seeing. And we talked about it off camera, you know, the little tweaks, and we're like, oh, we need to go there. I can hear that there's someone needs to talk about that, and being super present as a coach. And I think that's part of the challenge with over-regulating something. But one thing that I found fascinating, and I don't know if you can relate to this or agree with this, but I actually think my coaching experience has helped me so much as a podcast host.
Yeah, I mean, when you're interviewing, you can listen, but also it's that you can pick up on the nuances in what a person's coming across with what they're saying, and again, the art of questioning is so important. But yeah, I would say that's helped me. You know, I'd love to be a better public speaker. You know, as something that the more I'm in the public eye, the more I'd like to grow those skills and develop storytelling skills and all sorts of things. But I'm okay where I am at the moment. You know, and that's good. If I want to grow, create more options.
Yeah. And as you said earlier, it's just going with the flow and seeing what happens.
Absolutely. We can all look back and criticize. I was talking to a client about this yesterday, because they're so good at comparing themselves with where they're not. And they were like, oh, I should be here, I should be there, this is where I want to be. And I said, that's lovely that you have these goals, but there's quite a bit of focus on where you're not. I said, how does that feel? And they're like, yeah, not the greatest. And I'm like, let's have a little look at how far you've come. And they went through their history a bit, and then you could see the smile on their face. And they're like, so how does your future look now? We've just done this rerun of your history. That's so much better. And it's really important, as coaches with mindset change, anyone really, to create a list to sometimes at the end of the day, look at what have you done well? How far have you come? What's worked out well for you? What successes have you had? What wins? And then use that, if you're going to use it, to plot the next day. Okay, so that's gone really well. What could I do tomorrow? That would be another way of me going, yes.
Yeah.
So that worked for me. Create that intention and see what happens. Otherwise, we're just going to go on autopilot, and that might not be in our best interest. So creating an intention is a good idea, and then see what happens.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's a massive thing that I've been doing in the last couple of years, is just really reflecting and setting intentions to be able to know where I'm going. One of the things that we've spoken about with your intentions is your plans this year, specifically with writing your own book.
Yes.
So very excited. Tell us about your book ideas and how you're getting on.
So I'm so lucky to have the most incredible writing coach, because I've been trying to write a book for a long time. And then I realized that for me to write a book properly, I needed support and help. To try and do it by myself was quite a limiting trap my ego caught me up in. In other words, we won't ever get this book published, in a way. If we just keep you in this, you're going to write it by yourself thing. So I got a great writing coach, and they create the whole structure for me, as in like, this is what do you want to say in this chapter? Okay, here's the flow. The things that you want your audience to think about. So the listeners come from this chapter to this chapter. What do you want them to think of, feel? And I'm like, I've never would have thought about this. So yeah, that bit's going very well. But the whole book is about anxiety, and it's about anxiety being a brilliant wake-up call. So it's a wake-up call for us to look at our lives and use anxiety in a positive way. It's a messenger to find out where the fire is and look for a way to put that fire out. Because you can turn anxiety down quite easily, longer breaths, you can do all sorts of hacks. But if you don't put the fire out, it will keep burning, and anxiety and negative thoughts will still keep appearing. So the book is all about seeing and changing your relationship with anxiety, changing your experiences of it, what to do with it, and how to improve your life using anxiety as a tool. So yeah, I think it might be called Anxiety Wake Up Call or something along those lines. We will see.
Yeah.
We will see.
I love that. Oh, I'm so excited to have a read of it. I think it's one of those topics I think is so, it's a lot of people talk about it and talk the talk, but not many of them walk the walk. And I'm really excited to have a read and learn from my own mental health, to be very honest with you, and really take a lot from what you shared, Paul, because I think one of the interesting things about what you've shared is it's not all in the mind. Yes, there's a lot of changes that need to be made, but I think a lot of people just still are in the anxiety, mental health, mind, not the rest of the body.
Yeah, I mean, we're discovering more, for example, that your gut health can have a big impact on anxiety. Women's health, hormonal issues, thyroid can have a big impact on anxiety. You can change your mindset and try and be more positive, but if your gut's off, if your body is stressed, or you've got hormonal issues, no thinking any differently is going to help you become less anxious. But yet that is the standard line.
Yeah.
So working out what is it that your body needs. Is it being neglected in some way? And it's very easy in our culture to neglect it. We want to go to bed when we want to go to bed. We want to eat what we want to eat. Hydrate. I'll have something to drink later. All the sorts of things that we do to abuse the body. And it will let you know through anxiety. It's like a messenger, a knock at the door saying, make those changes. And if you don't make those changes, it will just knock louder. as it did for me.
Mm.
Because again, it was, I was thinking, oh, it's just me being gay. That's why I'm anxious. If I could just change my thoughts, if I could just make them more positive, completely ignoring my whole lifestyle was literally terrible, to put it mildly.
And that's what will all be revealed in the book, I'm sure, which I'm very excited to read. Now, while we're on the topic of books, as a book publisher, I'm a massive believer. A lot of authors that start writing their book are usually inspired by other authors or other books. And we often read other books as well. What's one book or author that sort of helped and inspired you on your journey?
Do you know, I love that you asked that question, because I had already written my book. I wrote it and I read it back and I went, this is boring. Right. So I'm like, I'm switching off from it. Maybe it's because I know all the content, but I thought, what is it that I need to do differently? And I've been reading have you ever heard of an author called Young Pueblo?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
He would be a good podcast. Yeah, he would be, I'm going to gun for him. Anyway.
I'll see if I get there first.
I will fight for him. And his book, Clarity and Connection, with very short prose, just was, I'd fully get what he was saying in the 5 lines that he'd written in, and I was like, oh my God, that is beautiful. And you'd reread it and you'd want to tell someone about it. And I looked at my book and I thought, do you know what? There are a lot of books out there on anxiety, which are just like books, and it goes into the technical detail of what anxiety is and the biology of it. But when you're anxious, and I remember one of the first books I picked up, I think it's Feeling Good by Dr. David Burns, it's about this big. It's literally huge. And that made me feel anxious looking at it. So I remember thinking, I wanted to write a book almost like Clarity and Connection that would be really powerful and so informative, but yet written in a way which be so easily digestible. But yeah, so that's been the challenge. And because I'm naturally a bit of an over-explainer, and that's okay. I think that comes from my childhood where I wasn't listened to, right? So it was easy for me to over-explain in the book and write too much. What if they didn't get it? Do I need I put in extra detail? So it's been wonderful to just cut it right back and have a coach who looks at that and then edits it so that about 3/4 of it is gone. And you're like, right, okay, I love what you did. Yeah. So I would say Young Pueblo has been someone whose work I have really enjoyed recently. And there's another author way beyond anything I would be able to write, but his name is Mark Nepo, and he did a book called Awakenings. Very famous. I'd never heard of it until this year, since doing some work on that. And again, it's done in a diary format. So you look at the date and it will have a beautiful parable or reflection, and then some little things that you can meditate on. And it's like reading something that gives you a hug. Yeah, it's lovely. And I'm gonna see if I can get him on my show as well.
Wow.
But yeah, it's those sorts of authors that I'm really enjoying at the moment, where I want to write something clear, concise, and gives a person that warm feeling inside and hope that they can change and know that they can change.
I love that description. It's like reading something that feels like it's giving you a hug. That's amazing. That's really, I'm dying to read it. I'm actually going on holiday tomorrow, so I might get that on Audible or on Kindle or whatever and take my holiday.
It really is lovely. It's one of those books where you're going to your partner, you need to listen to this. They're like, what? And you're reading out a little bit of it, and it just makes sense. You're reading someone's, he's been through quite a lot, I think, Mark Nepo, and you're reading his story. And then he creates the reflection where you're going, oh, I think this really does reflect back at me. And then you've got a series of little things at the end which are inspiring me to think about from my book of what can I get a reader to do, to think about. Because in a way, what you're doing, I described it being like a warm hug. The experience of reading that book is more important in a way than the content. They're getting a really powerful feeling from reading it. That's why it's become memorable.
Yeah.
I mean, you've ever read a book and you're just flicking through it. It's great information, but there's not much connection. You know, you're like, oh yeah, this is good. This is very informative. The same on social media. You know, we do social media. A lot of it's very informative, and I can be very informative. And that you can see that content die a death. But when you do something which creates a experience, an emotional reaction, then that video tends to do very well.
Yeah, it's all about how we make people feel. With our book publishing company, I'm forever reading books, and I'm like, to be honest, people say to me, do you not need to read my book before you decide if you publish it? And I'm like, no, because I can help you craft a great book. Even if you think you've written it and it's rubbish, I can help you. But if I believe the person is coachable and has a great story to tell and a great book in them, that's what I decide to publish, because actually it's how you make someone feel in the book that's the most important part. That's what inspiration really is.
So is there a book then for you that made you go, right, okay, this is how I want people to feel from what you've created? And with your business, was there a book that did that pivot? What was it?
It was really interesting, actually, because obviously I've published 40 best-selling books, so I've read a lot of books. And actually, it was really interesting to read a very different book to what we've published, and it was 10x is easier than 2x.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, by Dr. Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan. Probably one, because we hadn't published it. So I'm reading it. I was on my holiday and I was reading it. And for anyone that hasn't got it, it's not your typical, let's scale to 10x, woo, like American.
Grant Cardone did that.
Yeah, and it's not that at all. And I'm really not that. So I was really pleasantly surprised, and I couldn't put it down. And I remember, highlighting almost every page. And I'm a book person, so I will have a book that I highlight and scribble on, and I'll buy another copy as a clean copy which will go on the bookshelf.
Really?
I'm like a proper studier. And it was just the mindset of it, but also how it made me feel, and through the stories that they share, you know, the story of Michelangelo and that throughout the book. And it was just like a different level of feeling. And I think that's where, for me, reading that book has helped me become an even better writing coach and book publisher, because I've seen different ways of doing it now. And it took what I felt to a different level. And I'm like, right, this is where I want my writers and my authors to get to.
Do you know, it's funny because Ben Hardy was my mentor. I was part of his one of his programs when he was writing that book. And I remember the Michelangelo thing being presented to us to talk it through. But it is a phenomenal book.
Yeah. And
it really does get you thinking. This is a big mindset change, because if you have a look at most people's goals, and it's Ben that highlighted this, was if your goal is too small, then you're not likely to make much in the way of changes with your mindset, with your life, to reach that goal. But if you create what looks like an impossible goal, even though, you know, you could do it, but it's going to take a lot, it challenges you in a way which you just cut away so much. And you have to be incredibly honest about how you're going to raise the floor, what you're going to have to drop, everything. And it really is challenging. And, you know, I was part of Ben's group, and that, you know, do it with him at the same time, and then also reading the book, and also getting to meet Dan Sullivan and be coached by Dan as well. It's all been 10x. And, you know, what are you going to do to get there? And what they all and it was Dan or another coach I was talking to, they were pointing out 10x is not just easier than 2x, it's very different to 2x. It's a completely different path.
Yeah. And that's I think the biggest difference for me was not even taking the action, it was thinking differently, because I would never have set an impossible goal, because I hate not achieving goals. So I was very much brought up to get the best grades. And if you set that goal, you're always going to make it. It's not like I could never have like a good, great, and what I call a wow target. I had to hit the wow. Like, good and great isn't good enough, you know? So I'd never ever set that 10x goal. You know, people say, oh, shoot for the moon and you'll end up on the stars or whatever it is, right? Yeah. I just was like, no, if I'm shooting for the moon, I'm hitting the moon. Like, that's just the way I have been in my childhood and growing up to who I am now. So it was a different way of thinking for me that actually helped me see that. And honestly, in the last 6 months, it's been game changing. It's been fascinating. And I think that's the reason why I love being around inspiring people that can see those things and call you on that, and so on. And the fact that you've been, you know, inspired by both of them is just incredible.
It is, because I think to point out when people go, oh no, but what if you don't reach the goal? That's not the point. because you've 10x'd your goal, even if you got just halfway, even quarter way, you've done something phenomenal. And it could lead you to change course or think about what you could do next to really begin to move towards what you said you wanted to move towards. But a lot of people are frightened of that fear of failure. Understandable. But what we're describing, if we're honest, is a sensation in the body. That's a dysregulated nervous system. So if you didn't feel it, would that stop you? You know, and that's what we're halted by a thought. You're not going to make it, and a feeling, and we're like, okay, yeah, I'm not going to do it then. And it's not even true. It's just a sensation. And I thought, so why not break through and do something, you know, wonderful with that? Embrace that thought, embrace that feeling. It can't last. And then create what it is that you really want to create in life. People are too frightened to create what they really want in life. Just imagine if people weren't. So I think that's the next revolution for us. I think everything that's happening at the moment is almost like a crisis, pushing people to go, well, this life's a bit shit. Sorry to use my language, but this is awful. This is really awful. I'm going to have to stop trying to get new cars, all this new, you know, fancy materialistic stuff, new experiences. I have to come back to here and find out what it is that would really make me happy. And then that's where the revolution comes in. So you're doing it from inside out. Most people are trapped trying to change their life on the outside, and that's the trap.
And how amazing it's going to be when people can inspire others through doing that themselves. You know, I genuinely believe it'll be a fantastic ripple effect that will come from that. And that's what's the most inspiring thing of all. Now, Paul, it's been so great having you on the show. I can't believe how quickly the time has gone. So thank you so much. And it's been great being inspired by you today, and also hearing some of the people have inspired you on your journey. Now, we have a tradition on the show. So I've got one last question for you. Who do you know that has an inspiring story that you think we should have on the show next?
I've interviewed so many people. Who would be a good person to have on the show? I would say, I've mentioned him to you before, Jordan Tarver. He's an American. He lives in America though. So I don't know if he'd do anything online, but he had a near-death experience, which then changed his life. And I thought that was quite a powerful story. And when I interviewed him, he was going to talk about his book. And it's a great book, but we went down the path of what was really going on behind his, you know, in his mind. And he wasn't expecting it to go where it went. So I think he would make a great guest for you. Really, yeah.
Fantastic.
So if he ever comes to the UK,
yeah, let's make it happen.
Make it happen.
Oh, thank you so much, Paul. I really appreciate for being here. Appreciate you opening up so much and just sharing your golden nuggets. It's been fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Well, guys, what a fantastic interview that was with Paul. I hope you have enjoyed it. And if you haven't already, do make sure you make a note. What was the most inspiring parts that you can take from what Paul shared to help you with changing your mindset and really becoming awake? Now, if you haven't already, do make sure you share in the comments, if you're watching on YouTube, what has inspired you the most from this episode. And if you're listening on any of the audio platforms, then get over to YouTube to share your comments, and make sure you follow and subscribe so you don't miss our next inspiring guest. I'll see you next week.